All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you all for joining Logista's Preparedness Partners webinar series. Super excited today. My name is Ethan. I'm one of the co-founders of Logista. I'm here with the Logista team and as well as our other co-founder, Drew. We're talking about the SNS process. So specifically, if we're looking at some sort of medical point of distribution, MPOD response, receiving the SNS material, being able to log it properly, get it out to the different points of distribution, and what all entails with that. And we kind of came up with a really cool concept we hope you guys like today, which is a hybrid tabletop with a demo to show how this process works for Logista. The goal here is really to start some conversations. And what we're hoping to do is provide a platform where we highlight some, some potential gaps and just get people thinking and talking about what this really looks like and what the future can be, right? So what does this process look like, and how can we optimize this? How can we make this more efficient and less of a lift for everybody who's involved doing this wonderful work? So, Drew, I'm going to hand it over to you, sir.
Cool. Yeah, let's get this started. And I'll frame the exercise here in a bit. Um, Everything that we put into Logista and that we helped form this exercise around, Ethan and I have been talking to emergency managers, public health folks, public works, for the past about 4.5 years now about their COVID experience. So that has resulted in over 200 conversations with over 200 agencies. So I am on a mission of digging up these after action reports, these lessons learned. And anybody who knows me or interacts with me or is in my circle knows that I'm a huge believer in sharing some of the lessons learned. But when I have these conversations and I talk to people and I try to be very candid, I say, hey, from a logistics standpoint, let's go back to COVID because it's one of the hardest things we had to do. What went well, what didn't? You'd be shocked how much people open up to me and what they share with me, and they want that to be shared. They want it to live on. They want the pain points, the good things. So, we've taken some of those, the things that they've shared, you know, the people had enough willpower. People had the right people. Um, People got to the objectives for the most part. Common themes that I saw, whether it was in, suburban Atlanta or urban California, was things weren't in place to the degree they needed to be ahead of time. Systems and tools were not up to par. And so we took some of those things, and that's what's been the foundation for Logista. That's what's been the foundation, I think, to what we've built in this exercise today. Um, and we made it a pillar. There's about 3 tenets, and we can quantify it and say, this is how much it came up in the conversations of what people want and what they need for the next one. Um, and I want to throw it over to Ethan now to kind of touch on those 3 pillars because it kind of acts as a foundation for today, before we jump into the exercise. So, can you walk us through a few of those from a logistics standpoint?
Yeah, absolutely, Drew. So, as Drew said, these were lessons learned from talking to a lot of different folks. And this is also what we built Logista around. So, you're going to see this later when we get to some of those demo components. But the first thing is counts. How are we counting? Everybody was using different types of unit of measurement that really decreases our interoperability, being able to communicate. So, boiling that down to eaches and then scaling it up as necessary, but really having a standard unit of measurement. The counts are also important, and getting it to eaches allows us to get to the second goal of category naming. We all are familiar with resource typing. We know the value of it. It's just kind of hard to do. And part of that is if you're using lots of different units of measurement, then you can't have apples to apples and you can't roll all of your products up to a category level count. What we do inherently needs a category level count. We're not concerned about individual products as much as we are about how many types of things do we have that has the same use. So that was another really, really important pillar that we landed on. And the last thing is this idea of continuity. Um, Real time data from multiple sites. So any sort of site or entity that's using any sort of resource in a response that gives you burn rate data at each one of those sites. And this is fundamentally what is going to increase interoperability within an agency or between agencies. And it's what is different from any commercial off the shelf system that is built to track logistics for sales. So if you're thinking about like Home Depot, if you're thinking about Sortly, anything like that, they're all there to sell a product and a SKU. We are responding to a disaster, and that has a very different need. So here's what that kind of looks like as we break each one down quickly. So retail systems, they want to sell a unit, a SKU, a package. So think of like a 10 count of pens in that blister pack, that plastic. That is one unit to them. For us, in a worst case scenario, you can take whatever that package is, break it down, and distribute components of that. So for today with SNS, if you have pills that are coming in 500 counts per bottle, we're not giving 500 pills to everybody that comes through the pod. We're going to break that down, we're going to package it, and we're going to distribute those individually. So a 10 count is 10 units for what we need. If you scale that up now and you look at, all right, we have multiple products that are counted by boxes, right? So we have 4 products. Let's call these like gloves. They come usually 100 count standard, but they can come 200 count, right? We don't know which kind of box we have in each one of these. And all those product lines are going to start adding up in your spreadsheet or in your other system. And to get a higher level count means you have to manually go through all that, add it all up, and hope that your formulas are correct. For what we need on a disaster response side is those products counted at an individual each level and then added up. If they're all medium nitrile exam gloves, then you just need to know how many medium nitrile exam gloves you have. You have 4,000. That's the goal. That's that need that everybody kept expressing to us and what we found through our own experience. The last part of this is where are we tracking data? In the past, it's really been at best the warehouses, what's coming in, what's going out. A response has so many more things than just a warehouse. It's strike teams, pods, alternate care sites, caches, hospitals. Everybody's using stuff. To have a full common operating picture, to be able to predict your logistical needs, you need to be tracking everything across the entire response. So we started figuring out a way to group these and organize them by like inventory. So we have in Logista, you'll see something called a group, which is a data wrapper that brings a group or like kind of inventory together. And then you'll see individual sites within it. And those are physical locations or teams or whoever's using products. Once your basic setup is there, so your warehouses and like caches, pretty much every group thereafter is going to be a response. So we're going to be working in a notional SNS response for today. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Drew to outline the scenario for today.
So we have about 40 minutes. I'm going to leave a little bit of time for some questions. If you had questions, put them in the chat. But what we're going to do today, we could talk a lot about inventory. Where does it start? Where does it end? We're not going to talk about blue sky times. We're going to try to stress this system. We're going to try to put us in a position that really pulls these systems thin, because that's what, when we talk to those people and have those conversations, that's where things start to break. So we're going to touch on the SNS. We're going to touch on trying to get eyes and see what's happening in the field at pod sites. We're going to try and talk a little about pharmacy and how we're tracking the CIPRA, the Doxy, lot numbers, expiration, NDC, all this different type of stuff from an inventory management standpoint. I'll ask some questions in between. And I hope you can take some of those questions back to your teams if it's helpful. Maybe just put some in the mixer in your mind. They may touch more on inventory management, but I'm going to throw it over to Ethan between each one of these little module updates to kind of run through Logista and see what it looks like from an inventory management standpoint, because we need to get more out of our inventory management than just tracking. We need to have accurate tracking that's easy to use, but we need to have insights. So let's kick it off. So the incident overview. So a mass biological attack is involved. It was suspected anthrax, and it was confirmed at a regional transit hub. A public health emergency was declared on day 1, and medical points of dispensing were activated by day 2. They are dispensing medical countermeasures, specifically Cipro and Doxy. So 3 active pods are now operating continuously for the past 72 hours. So we're going to start this on day 4. The regional MCMs are exhausted. So your partner counties and jurisdictions have shared their supply. Your inventory you have on hand is exhausted. An SNS package has been requested, but was initially delayed due to national threat uncertainties. Again, pulling on some of these conversations we talked to, where systems we thought that were in place and processes were delayed and strained. So let's start this. It's on day 4. The media activities that we're focused on is intelligence and planning to support the ongoing high pressure pod situations. We have the pods, we have 3 of them ongoing. We have an SNS that's on its way, has not been here yet. So some assumptions, some things that help frame our exercise a little bit. EOC, it's been declared a health emergency, and the EOC is at full staff. There's 3 active pods. A 4th site has been identified by the planning team, and they got an MOU to support that for future operations. Normal county operations have been suspended, many of them, so that personnel can be used and pulled into the pods and support the warehouse. The SNX package is en route. We have that confirmed, and there's been electronic receipt, and the physical receipt will be delivered, we're told, by day 5, 24 hours. Again, the MCM inventory is low. We've exhausted everything that's in hand and on regional, so what's at the sites is what it's at the sites. So some things that I'm kind of curious on, putting myself back into a pod manager, kind of overseeing pods back from the warehouse. If I'm a warehouse manager, what's the burn rate right now at these pods? I want to know overall in our operation, what are we burning through Cipro and Doxy, Cipro versus Doxy, and at each individual pod, which one's running hot, which one's not. I think that's always one of our things, right? Especially the public health folks, emergency management folks. You have your hands in pods and distribution of non-medical material, but we always want to know what's the burn rate so we can get one step ahead. One thing that we ran into in COVID that we'll run to in this exercise, what happens when 2 pod managers are just saying that they're both critically low and need the shipment most? When it arrives, they need it the most. They need it first. How do we adjudicate that? What are we using? What does your process at your agency look like? Are you using data as a phone call? And what are we using as a starting base for that conversation? And the thing I'm always like, when I help with tabletops, if you had perfect visibility into one thing during this, what would it be? So you have a lot going on in the field. What do you want to know? If you could have one thing you'd want to know that would help give you clarity, it's always a thing I try to put in people's minds, because why not try to work towards finding that? Okay, Ethan, I'm going to throw it to you from an inventory management standpoint. What would you do in Logista? What would you be tracking? What would you be looking at to help planning intelligence in our next operational period?
Yeah, I'm going to bring up our Logista dashboard here, and we're going to run through how we would run at that first problem, right? What do we have? Where is it? How quickly you're using it? And most importantly, how many days will those pods be sustainable? So up at the top, just to orient everybody, here's that group that I was talking about before. I'm going to select our notional SNS Response 2026. And let me just relog in here real quick. So I'm going to grab that group first. Okay. And then from that group, I can select any site within it. So I'm going to pull in, I'm going to go look at, we'll just say pod 1. So as soon as I select that group, you can see on the map where all the pods are. When you click on them, you can see who's running it. So if you do have to reach out to somebody for clarification, that information is right there front and center. Most people probably have something that looks similar to this page, in their spreadsheets where it's every single product listed out. If it's a different lot number, if it's a different expiration, if you happen to have that information, it'll break it down into different line items. Um, and this is great. This is a good start. But what we asked ourselves is, how do we change how we respond? How do we make this less clutter? How do we make it more operational and actionable? So we created a whole new, different way of viewing your inventory, and we call that the simplified inventory. So I'm going to switch over to that view. We're going to see a few things right at the beginning here. Um, you have the ability to put in a date range for your data, which is going to look at burn rates. It's going to help us establish what subset of data we want to look at. So I've already gone in and put the 13th through the 16th because we're on day 4 of this response. So that way it looks at all the items used during that period and does some calculations on the back end to help us identify what our burn rates are and sustainability. So if I drag out this left side here, immediately I can see in pod 1, I've got 2 types of products here. I've got our Cipro, I've got our Doxy. This is a category level count. So if I click on things like our Doxy, on the right-hand side, I'm going to start seeing the individual products that are nested underneath that. And I'm actually just going to go ahead and I'm going to switch over to pod 2 because it has a little more variance in the data here. So each one of these categories can have 50, 100 products that are all rolling up into the category level. And it's calculating the usage across all those different products to tell me what the average daily burn rate is for each of these. It's showing me my quantity on hand, and then it's projecting how many days left based on that usage. This pod is going to be sustainable. Now, again, if I click over into the Doxy and give us a little more real estate to work with, I can see that I have 2 products here. I can see the expiration for each one of those products. I can see lot distribution, really helpful stuff. Here's where it gets amazing. If you toggle from your storage locations at your local site to all sites in that group, and this is why we structured it that way to have those response groups and those sites, I now immediately see for every one of those other pods what everybody has on hand in real time. I now know what their burn rates are, so who's using the most and how quickly, and how many days left they are going to be sustainable. So from this information, without having to make another call, we know right off the bat that pod 1 is in the worst case scenario. So when that truck comes, our first move is going to be adding inventory to them, getting it out the door and to pod 1. Pod 2 is the second worst, not much better than pod 1. Pod 3. And then pod 2 actually has a decent amount of doxycycline. So they have 5 days if they continue at the current rate. Now it may shift, and this is where expertise meets data. So your expertise as a responder who knows that it's going to be increasing, you're taking that into account. But this gives you a really good starting point, not having to call people, not having to work through questionable data, whether or not somebody's broken a formula in a spreadsheet. You've got all this stuff to help figure out. So based on this information, we're going to start with pod 1. Pod 3 is going to be our next resupply, and pod 2 is going to be the third after that. So this is some really, really awesome stuff, powerful. You can go back and forth between both of those.
I think like one way I would use this too, I would do some print to PDF, use something like that, and send that ahead of my command meeting, or at minimum bring it. And then we can have that discussion, right? The data is part of the discussion, but we need to use our expertise too. And but it's giving us a starting point for some of those discussions.
Absolutely, Drew. That's a great point. And one other thing that I'll point out here is if something is expired, it flags it red. If you click on it and bring up we call it a baseball card view of the product, you're going to see not only an image of what that product is, but if you have a memo that uh, extends that expiration, one of those SLEP memos from SNS, you can attach it in the system and it's going to live with that product. You don't have to go and search for it anywhere else. you're able to pull that up. So as you're doing your planning, again, you're not having to change different windows to get that intelligence to do the planning. You have it right here. So it's going to flag for you. You're going to click into that product, and now we have the information. So question for the group, as we're going through this exercise, how are you documenting expirations? Where are you putting the documentation? Do people have access to those platforms where you're saving the documentation? Is it in SharePoint? Is it a OneDrive? Um, do you need new licenses for that? If they are volunteers, are they going to, if you're bringing in MRC, do they have access to those systems? Those are some of the things, we've been thinking about, and we want other people to, start noodling on as we go through this.
Right on. And even just for clarity too, like if we wanted to put gloves in there, masks, anything we're burning at a pod site, we could track that too. We're just showing MCMs for the urgency of this situation since it's anthrax.
Absolutely correct. Yeah, any type of product, and you can, again, multiple products. It takes roughly 200 unique SKUs to run an ACS. If you have, 5 different products per SKU, you're already looking at 1,000 lines. Like, it gets big fast, which is why, again, that category level, being able to streamline it and know what you have on hand for a type of item, a kind of item, makes it so much faster to know your ground truth and what you can provide.
There's a saying I really like. It was the founder of Netscape says, if we have data, let's let the data speak. If we don't have data, let's go with opinions and let's go with my opinion. So we're trying to equip you all with some objectivity to go into those conversations to say, hey, this is what the data says. Now, let's poke holes in it. Let's use it. Let's lay it on top of what we do know and what we've learned before and what our community liaisons are saying, what our operation intelligence team is saying. So it's all big picture, and we're hoping we can just equip the logs team with some more of that. Okay. Um, Good question from Glenn too. Are you basing this on open pods, or is there accounting for closed pods as well? So the closed pods can totally work. Closed pods, again, for folks are private businesses or organizations or faith-based organizations that we're pushing stuff out to and they're handling. We can get into this later, but we have an unlimited user account. So like unlike, Microsoft SharePoint, where you have to get a new license. If you want to give a license to your closed pod point of contact and they want to do their inventory management in this, which I would recommend so you can get an insight into their burn rate, we can put them into that. You can put them into that. And that's a pod site, right? That'd be a closed pod site, Disneyland. And you'd be able to see what they're using as long as that person had some just-in-time training on the system and you gave them an account at the time. Okay, I'm going to go on to the scenario update. So we got a little visibility in the pods. Right now, we're receiving and offloading. So the truck arrived from Cipro and Doxy. SNS arrived the next day. Need to offload that product and begin receiving it, putting it into our system, including tracking by lot and expiration. Initiate strategic distribution of new critical MCMs to the pods. So the new MCMs that we get in and we're inventorizing, now where do we want to send them? How do we know where to send them? Based on the current usage. And then active dispensing. Pod sites must receive inbound shipments, update their inventory and their local storage at their site, and continue to safely distribute the MCMs. So some things, I'll put this in the chat. That was a really good comment. This one, when Ethan shows this, when I look at this part, to me, it's about documentation, warehouse, field sites, lot expiration. So things like if the physical count doesn't match the hand receipt, it's 200 short. What is your documented process to resolve it? Things like at the end of this operational period of the active pods, how do you know what was actually dispensed versus what was allocated? Because we found a lot in COVID, we were counting what left the warehouse and we say, hey, that's what's happened in the field. No, that's what's left the warehouse. There's a whole other staging area, especially when you have multiple sites, what's actually being burnt. So I'll put these questions into the chat, and E, let's see how you're receiving the SNS, how you're documenting it, how you're using that info, and then how the pods are then going to receive it from the warehouse, that SNS material, and they're putting it in their system so we can have connectivity.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thanks for prepping that, Drew. We're tapping in Vic. He's our CTO at Logista. He's going to help us run through some of this next stuff. So the first thing that we need to do right now is we need to add this information into Logista. So we've received the products, and now we just need to add the product information. So that's gonna, you can see on the left side that we have the groups. He's already clicked into doxycycline, and you can see that we have 3 products of doxy in there. He's gonna go in and add another product from the SNS. So he's going to add that item, and it's going to ask him to put in the barcode. He's done that. It's automatically going to pull information from the API as much as it can pull in. So it's going to pull in name, lot, expiration, things like that. One important thing we need to do, because it's coming from the SNS and we want to make sure we're tracking their product different from our product, is we're going to add a little hyphen SNS at the end of the product name and the lot number. That way we can track it as a unique SKU to itself, even though we may already have this type of product already in our inventory. So he's gone in here, he's adjusted what he needs to adjust so he can go and save this record. Once he saves this record, everybody has access to it. So you never have to input lot, expiration, anything like that again, which helps make sure that we have actionable data. The 2 pieces you want is a really simple system and accurate data. So now that he has this in here, he's gonna move over to our mobile view, and we're going to add this product to the warehouse first. So he's going to go ahead and take action here, and he's going to use the built-in scanner to scan that QR code or barcode, whichever one that the packaging has, and it's going to bring up the product. And now he's going to add, let's just say 10,000 units or eaches to the site. And actually in there right now, Vic, I think we have pod 1 up. Are you able to switch over to the warehouse group, and we'll add it to the warehouse first?
Okay. I'll reset this.
And what you can see here is even in the mobile view, it's really easy to bring up your groups and sites. So he's going in with the group, he's selected warehouse. He's now going back to that main warehouse, and he's just adjusting where his location is so that it's going to burn properly. And then he's going back, he's clicking on that scan. He's scanning that QR code, super easy, and then taking action. So now it's going to walk him through what he wants to do. So he's going to add, it's going to ask him whether he wants to count this in eaches or SKUs. He's going in eaches. He's adding 10,000 pills. And then he's hitting submit there. It's going to confirm that the location is the right location for him. And you can put it into a storage area or anything like that. So let's just add it to like receiving, because that's where it would normally go. So everything else is there. He's going to hit confirm, and it's going to add 10,000 of those units. And it does a little nice pop-up to confirm that where it's at. And then it's going to show us that record detail and give you a history. We'll come back to that. Keep that in mind of how you track all of the actions that you take. So the next thing that we need to do is transfer some of this to pod 1, because we know that they're the critically low ones. Let's go get them some stuff. So he's going to open up again that scanning capability. This is right in the mobile phone, so it's easy for people to take action. And instead of adding, he's now going to select transfer as the activity. So he's going to go down to the types of remove, and let's do what do we want to do there, Vic? 1200.
Oh, yep. Okay.
And we'll submit that to the pod 1. So it's going to load, and it now lets us choose a different group. So he's going in and he's going to choose the SNS response, and it's going to then ask him which site he wants to do within it.
All right. Starts out from receiving where it was before, and then now we're moving it to pod 1.
So he's select the location it's coming from, where it's going to, and he's sending it over to pod 1. The reason also that we break this down into groups and sites is because you can attach funding information to it so that everything that is going from one place to another is getting tagged separately. So you can do some financial calculations as well. So he's going to go and submit that. And we now have a record of this transfer. So we've initiated that transfer. The next step is we have to receive it at the other location. So in our dashboard, we're going to change our location. We're going to get out of the warehouse. Let's jump into pod 1. So change our group to the response, change our site to site 1. We can see it gives us the information there. And now we're scrolling down and you're going to get a transfer log here. So it shows very clearly on that pod manager's phone, they have an incoming transfer. They're going to visually make sure that those counts match, and then they're going to open up that record. They can take that record, verify it, and then it will automatically add that into their pod. So we've just, in this time alone, we've ingested the information from the SNS material. We've added it to the warehouse, and we already sent out a transfer that's been received and automatically imported into the pod. Now the pod can use it. So the last thing we're going to do here is we're going to open up a new form and we're going to start using and pushing stuff. And it's just as simple as we've been doing it before. You can also search by text. So right now, excuse me, Vic is showing us how even if you're not scanning something, if it's something that doesn't have a barcode or whatever, you can just start typing and it has a really powerful global search and it will bring up products that match. So he's going through that typing approach and he's able to go in and execute that. So it takes you to your storage area. You then take action and we're going to push out some of this doxy. And that's just a simple use. So we've added something, we've transferred something, now we're going to use it. And so he's able to then add his counts. Again, you can count it by eaches or by SKUs. So he's going to push out 100. And then once he hits submit, it will create that record that we've been looking at. And then everybody would be able to see that, be able to access it later. And then that's the process for being able to actually move, take action, and use this stuff. Every single time he submits a form, it's logging stuff in the background as he's selecting, as he's choosing these things. It knows where it's coming from. So what storage location, it knows the lot, it knows the expiration, it knows the product name. All that is being logged, even though you're just scanning one thing and then telling it the quantity that you want it to take. So it's constantly working in the back end to make sure that that data is consistent and accurate through and through. Fantastic. Vic, thank you for that. Drew, anything else, or can I bring up a scenario for you? Keep us jamming along so that our people get our pills.
Yes. One question. Does it include a bill of landing? What does it include when we make a virtual transfer? Can you talk a little bit about the activity log, about, if it's an asset, the email automatic, what is included when we do a virtual so we have some accountability?
Yeah, that's a great question. We'll get into that when we get to the activity log. In short, it's going to say who it's coming from, who initiated it, what site it's going to, and all the product information there. If it were an asset, which Legis does assets, but just because we're talking SNS for focusing on pills, it would list out every asset. It would list out its serial number or a unique ID if you use asset tags, and you would have a record of all of that in that transfer. And you can print that off and send it with the truck if you want to. But the beautiful thing is they have access to it on the mobile, so they can always pull that up. So if you've got multiple deliveries coming in, you can just match it based on what you have on your phone.
That's about it. I think we can move on. And a couple of other questions. We'll show this a little bit later, but we've made this from my experience at local public health, and I know a lot of the people here as well. We made this to be kind of a pod in a box. So you've seen that, we had the SLEP form in there. You can put in for those closed pods or your open pods, any field site. You can put in your floor plan. You put in a staffing roster. You can put in the MOU. You can put in the site security risk assessment. all for that pod. So when that pod manager gets there, they come it up. Hopefully they'll have time to maybe show that. But let's move on here. So we made it through the day. We got the SNS stuff in. We put it in. We're dispensing. We have some eyes that are what's happening at the 3 different pod sites. So each pod has received their supplies and made it through the day successfully. We're going to talk a little sit, rep, and forecast. Sounds almost like Netflix and chill. It's a very EM-based one. Sit rep and forecast. Pod managers are tasked with providing a sit rep that accounts for current inventory levels, burn rates, and resupply needs for next 48 hours. Open the floodgates. We're asking the people in the field to give us what they need in the next 48 hours. 213 submission. A 213 must be submitted for that request then. So a lot of things happening outside of this, public information, communication, staffing, but some of the things that we learned from our own experience and talking again, those conversations was people being pinged midstream, mid-operation on data updates. So you're like, your state SNS coordinate needs to know by 6 o'clock this evening, all sites, all products by a category level count. So I want you to kind of walk through that, put yourself in those shoes. How would you do that? How would you get that information? Is it recounting? Is it putting staff to do that? Are you tracking things in a spreadsheet? How would you do that? What data would you use? Roughly how long would it take? How are you forecasting the future inventory needs again? All these things, there's so many disruptions for needed data, whether it's from your director, the governor, the mayor, your public information team. We're trying to organize this so that you can pull that, convert it to a PDF, send it on its way. And we have a couple different dashboards for that. But Ethan, can you show us a little bit in the planning and decision support for a resupply? What would that look like? So again, from the scenario, we made it through the day. We're doing an inventory count to get what we have at a category level, and we need to fill out 213 based on the needs. So what's the missing gap for the next 48 hours? What do we need, and how do we fill that out?
Yeah, this is it brings back dark days for me of helping out, as a logistics chief at a field hospital and alternate care site. This used to take me so much time because you get interrupted 1,000 different ways as you're trying to compile data, as you're trying to fill out that 213, and then the entire time you're questioning how accurate things are. So this was an area we spent a lot of time trying to streamline for folks. So back on the desktop view, we're going to go over on the left side to our insights module. And let me log in again really quickly. The insights module here does a lot. It's like a one-stop shop made for a pod manager or anybody else, kind of pod manager level and above. So we're going to select our SNS response. We're going to come in. Let's look at pod 2. And we can see that, our doxycycline, we have our historical burn rate graph going on. So this is what we use. On the right-hand side, it breaks down in quick facts how many days we have remaining. Again, because we have our burn rate date selected in the upper right. It gives us our available stock. It tells us our custom 3-day burn rate, average, so 400 per day. And we burned about 1,200 over the last 3 days. This is super, super helpful for folks. You can also add multiple items so that you can track those in parallel and contrast and compare. On the right side, we can switch out which quick facts we want to look at. And then the really cool thing is if you hit this projected button, it's going to change from a historical burn rate to a declining slope graph. So it shows you where you're at right now and where you hit 0. So for our Cipro, we're going to, run out in a day. And then for our Doxy, we're running out on the 13th. So we've got a visualization that Drew said we can take a screenshot. We can print a PDF. If you wanted to go through each one of these pods and pull up a different view for each one, you could do that and just screenshot just the projected chart and then compile all that back into a some sort of slideshow, right? And you could have templates there. How you guys create is up to you, but we're trying to give tools for folks to be able to do that. If you'll remember, pod one was really, really bad. We were going to run out on, the next day for both of them. Now that we've added that doxy to that pod one, we've given ourselves 2 days of runway, and it's already taken that into account into the system. So this used to be 0 days remaining. Now it's up to 2 days with that resupply. And when I look in this chart, I can see that the Cipro is still at, 0 days, but it's now projecting that we have 2 more days of runway because of that resupply. So great job, Vic, in getting him the bills when they need it. If we scroll down, there's some other cool stuff. I won't dwell on it too much, but again, it shows you what every other pod has on hand for the items you select. So this is their actual quantity. In case you need to make a lateral resupply, you know who to reach out to. It shows you what is expired or non-expired. And it also does a cost estimate. A lot of times we get asked, well, how much is this costing? How much have we spent on this, that, or the other widget? It shows you your cost per day based on that date range and the total cost for that date range, as well as what's been used or damaged or expired or deployed, sent, elsewhere to like a hospital. And you can turn that into a graph. So this is a fantastic way to have situational awareness. It's a planning tool. It's an operations tool. It crosses so many different vectors here to try to help folks get what they need. So I've got my list. I got my information here. Here's how easy it is to fill out this 213. It asked me how many days of supplies I need. I was told to plan for 48 hours, so I'm going to put 2 days in. On the right-hand side, it shows me my fire list. So basically what I need to focus on. I'm going to add both of these in here. It's going to do some automatic calculations based on, again, that date range for the burn rate. It tells me what I have on hand, my average daily burn rate for each of those products or those categories, and then the quantity I need to be sustainable. Then it does the math and it makes a recommendation. And it says, here's how much we recommend. I'm going to round that up to 900. It says I don't need anything for doxycycline. Again, this goes back to Drew's point of how do we adjudicate when people both think that they are the highest priority. We have data that says that they can be sustainable for 2 days. The data is taken into their burn rate. It's real time. It's telling them exactly what they need on hand. So that's an effort to try to minimize it. We won't get rid of it completely, but we can try. We hit export. We select the 213 PDF, and it's going to generate a PDF for us. So let me bring that up. I'll show you all what it looks like. It's going to populate this resource request with any information we already know. So we know the response group, we know the date, we know the quantity is 900. We break it down by a category level name. That way the warehouse has flexibility to provide whatever product meets that category. We all know that some people love the black gloves, blue gloves, purple gloves, they all work the same. You can decide what product to give them because they are requesting a category. Super important.
Yeah. And it's given our pharmacy team some leeway on certain types of responses as well here with medications.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for that, Drew. It gives the pod name and the position, the person who's requesting it. You can print this off, wet sign it. You can sign it with a certificate and then send it up. And that's your 213. It took us, 2 minutes to run through that. And that's the whole point, is it needs to be easier for folks to do the work they need to do so that they can get back to the stuff that needs a human intervening, that expertise of the years of experience that everybody has. Now, Drew, I'll send it back to you.
So let's move this forward. One of the things we learned from our conversations is people said we could meet the first wave. We can get stuff stood up. We have a lot of it was hard, but we get it up. What became really challenging is as it evolved, and as one who has deployed and supported disasters, I can tell you it's human nature to not think how complex an event gets. We like to kind of feel like we have our arms around it. So in this activation, we're going to open up a 4th pod. It's going to be at the regional university. It's been decided. There's an active MOU that's been executed, and we got some staff to staff it. they're available, and we're going to get that pod moving. So some things that I'm curious about. We got to open a pod and we have to staff it. Leadership just authorized a pod for your team and they need it operational by the morning. Let's say it's 10 p.m. Walk me through what needs to happen on your team's end. Think about that. And then again, we only have so much time and brain space in our industry. What's the hardest part of that for you? Is it getting the search staff there, finding the search staff? Is it getting staff the stuff they need? I've been a victim of, hey, everything's on SharePoint. I say, great. I just flew in to help this. Where's SharePoint? Oh, you have to get a license. Cool. How long does that take? 24 hours. You have to go through HR. And that's not going to fly. So when a pod manager does show up, how do you get them the stuff that they need? What if you say, oh, well, we have all our pod managers, they're all public health staff or they're EMA staff. What if it wasn't? What if you had to have search staff, somebody who's from the county over or within your region and they needed the documents and that kind of stuff? Where do you do that? So Ethan, briefly, if you could show us maybe how we can support some of that in Logista through inventory tracking.
Absolutely. And I'm going to try to jam through so we still have time for question and answer time. If you come into the admin, you can see our response group currently, and we've got our 3 pods. This group, fantastic group, they've already pre-vetted a number of other pods that they just created in advance under contingency pod sites. So we're going to look at this University of Toledo one. I can see that it has some plans and stuff in here that I can access. I see that there's the point of distribution operations plan. I can see there's, a quick reference guide. There's a floor plan in here, a memorandum of understanding. This looks like a great target. So we're going to go in and just edit this site. And all we have to do is change the group up at the top. So we take it from contingency pod to SNS pod and we hit save. We'll close out of this, come back into our SNS pod. We now see it as an active pod and we now can staff it with people. If we had stuff pre-positioned there, if we had inventory that was already there, that would transfer over as well. So all of the stores locations, all of the inventory, anything that's associated with it, you can bring over. And that's how you can also create caches. We're not going to get into that here. Would love to talk to people about caches, but that's the same methodology. It stores it and then you activate it. Let's add a pod manager here. So we're going to we're going to pull up all of our users. We're just going to use me as an example. I've been voluntold that I will be managing this pod. So I just want to vet this person really quick, make sure that we have their contact information. If I look in here, I can see that there's some certificates. So we make sure this person has their, their 100, 200, 700, 800. See if they have anything else that might be useful in here. We can see that there's also a military emergency management badge. So they at least understand, ICS a little bit. Great person. We're going to then select them and we're going to go to action and assign to site. So I can come in here and then I can select pod 4, hit submit. And this person now has been moved over to pod 4. That is it. When they log into the system, they will have access to pod 4. It will default to pod 4. They don't have to navigate different groups and sites. It pre-populates with them. We've been doing a lot of navigating because we're seeing a higher level global view of like an administrator, which most of you all would be. But down at that level, it's easy for them because it's just locked to the site that they have access to. They're still able to view some other data from other sites, but it's the actions they take are limited to that site. So that is how we get that up and running. And if we go back to our dashboard now, you're going to see with this response map, we had 3, we now have 4. And it's really easy to then bring those up and see who's operating where. Drew, I'm going to send it back to you.
Yeah, one question, hoping you can, any reaction first from Elizabeth. This may be a bit of an odd question. It's not actually, Elizabeth, I read it. We've had this discussion. If there are no damage meds, hopefully, and we move it out into the community long before it expires, Does it still calculate based on expiration or damage, even if that is not the case?
So if I'm understanding this correctly, if there is no expiration and there's no damage, it
Mhm.
would be just a standard inventory and it wouldn't log it as either.
Yep.
In order to mark something as damaged or expired, you have to physically go in and submit a form, and then you just scan the product, put in the quantity that expired or damaged, and mark it that way. The reason being is because a lot of those expirations can be expended, and we don't want to necessarily default and have expired items that you then can't use. It's how you can get things off your books, not necessarily a operational awareness. For anything that's expired that you have not marked yet, it'll send you an email, and you can set that for 30 days or 6 months, and it will give you a roll up of everything that's about to expire and is expired. That way
And
you can stay on top of that.
Ethan, another question. How is the burn rate, the amount used at the pod sites? How does Logista track that down to dispensing? So, can you maybe talk about how we're calculating that burn rate at the field? And I'll start with, we partnered with some health departments when we tested this and put it in the field, and they want to do it a couple different ways. So Long Beach Health Department helped us doing an exercise, and they did it at the question part of the pod when people were exiting, and they used an intern to just input what was dispensed on their forms on the mobile, and then they're using it that way. You could do it at the dispensing table, at the medication, have someone there. You could have it essentially when it leaves that staging area onto the floor. Um, and if there's at the end of that very operational period anything left, you could add back in.
Yeah.
But there's multiple touch points there, right in the pod. It's where in your pod plan you feel comfortable putting that in and tracking that. Anything to add to Ethan?
No, I think that's perfect. You look for the different choke points of the flow that makes the most sense for you all. And it depends on the number of bodies you have available. If everybody can manage it at the distribution tables, then that's great. But you can do it, as Drew said, as you push it to the floor, or when someone is under the monitoring phase, or when they have questions, if vaccines monitoring, or if it's questions on the way out. You could even add one person as they exit, right? And as every car is driving out, you're double checking the number of people and the dosage, and you're submitting it there. And that's just their job.
Cool.
So it's a lot of flexibility.
And yes, Devin, we can definitely clarify that if it's helpful on a phone call. Um, Cool, Ethan. I'm going to move on here with some FEMA documentation requests. So now your county emergency manager has notified you that FEMA has requested a preliminary accounting of all medical supply expenditures associated with that declared disaster. So they need it organized by site, product, cost category. They need it broken into received, waste, used, expired. If you notice, this is very informed from a disaster declaration standpoint. We've talked to multiple people who have gone through that gnarly process. Also, SNS accountability. Your state SNS was codified that ASPR is conducting a spot accountability of anything from the SNS that it's gone out. They want documentation of a product lot received, SNS product lot received, where it was sent, how much was dispensed, and what has happened to any unused quantity. Again, this is one of the biggest pain points we got with people during these prolonged ongoing accountability goes up, right? Those first 24, 48 out, especially in this scenario, 72 hours, you're pushing stuff out. One of the lessons we learned is there's a lot of holes in our planning assumptions. People go, well, then it'll just be over. No, there's going to be accountability at some point. Life continues on and the disaster is still happening. So you briefly touch on that, and we got maybe about 3 minutes to do that.
Yeah. So I'm going to do this as quick as possible so we can get to more Q&As. Here's the bottom line up front. Every action that's taken in the system is tracked very, very closely. So that gives you a timestamp, a date, who took that action, what it was, and the items. So it creates a record. And there was a question about this earlier. Here's where I can kind of show you all what that hand receipt looks like, what the documentation. If you bring up any record, it's going to show you the from and to. So this was used at a site, so there's no to. If it was a transfer, you would have both. It shows you what was submitted in that form. So it's very, very comprehensive. You can print any of these off. And let me bring up our transfer log here. So here's that transfer we talked about earlier that Vic did. We got it coming from the warehouse to pod 1. We know that Vic did this if we ever want to go back and ask him. And we can see that it was a quantity of 1,200 doxycycline. If I go to print this and bring up that PDF, here we have that record that you can print as a bill of lading, as you can, if you just need a paper record, if you want to send it up, a one-off. These are really great if you're using assets and you're sending to hospitals. So if it's like ventilators that you're trying to track, it'll list all these out. You can send that as documentation there. So it's fantastic in terms of starting your recovery documentation from the get-go. So when you need to then compile all this, you can use different types of filters that are built in here. And you're able to filter by different actions, by different items, and be able to see, oh, I want to see anything that was added, used, transfer, so on and so forth. Make a light query, and you're able to get the information that you need for our SNS coordinator there. So if we change our date range here to, we'll just take a broad one, all right, and type in SNS. And this is why, Vic had put SNS in there separately, is so that when we search, we can bring up anything that has SNS in it. If you want to talk more, I love documentation, I love data. We can definitely schedule a call and I can show you how that can be leveraged in a lot of ways. But I want to save some time for broad questions that folks may have. The thing that I think is really amazing, like in the time that we had here today, we had, identified what pods needed the supplies the soonest, what their burn rates were, and what they had on hand. You were able to receive that pod information, or be able to receive the SNS information and pull that in. We were able to distribute that to different pods. So we initiated a transfer. We were able to add it. We were able to distribute it. And then we were able to stand up another pod, add a person, all those really complicated things that become a headache, filling out 213s. All of that was relatively seamless, and it wouldn't take much longer in a real-time response, which is why we really wanted to structure it this way, to sort of show, what does that look like? How quickly can we get things down in terms of actionable items? So Drew, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, we spent some time. So if you liked what we're putting down today, nothing associated with Logista or inventory management of Logista at all, but we made a tabletop, kind of based off what we did today. But this thing's a lot more robust. Made it using HC framework, all that fun stuff. It's customizable, it's adaptable. If you want it, go ahead and just email me and I'll just reply. I'll get it out to you in the next 48 hours if you email, and get it back to you in 2 days. I would send it to everybody as attachment, but it doesn't usually go through if you have too many people with a large file like that. But this tabletop, it's really robust. It's talking about anything from SNS to the pods like we talked about. You can take it in different directions of logistics. You can work in comms and that kind of stuff if you want. Overall, I want you to have the tools to do what you need to do. And I think tabletop exercises are amazing ways to poke holes in stuff, to get leadership in a room. Sometimes when you can get, an hour and a half, 3 hours of their time to do something like this. I want you to feel supported on that journey and everything that we have to do in our industry that's in front of us, which are huge challenges. So again, if that's interesting to you, please email me. I'll get it out to you. Things super robust, super comprehensive. And hopefully it's minimal work on your end to be able to leverage that.
And Drew, if I can jump in, just to put an exclamation point on this, this is agnostic of Logista agnostic of any type of logistics management system. It is a pure logistics-based tabletop for you to exercise your system. So that's it's there for folks to use.
So, kind of finally, we have some tenants that we built into our system. Ethan touched on them. In order to get to those tenants, we have to have some of the things that you see here: unlimited users, unlimited assets, unlimited consumables, sites. My bigger point I want you to take away and leave you with is we need the tools. And I hope you get an inventory management system. If it doesn't have the things listed in here, I hope that you ask why, that you're a little skeptical. If it does have things that are listed in here, you're probably in decent hands. And we need stuff that's built for us. Our industry is different. That's why I've stepped away from going to disasters and spent so many years here now building this, is because we need stuff that can have pod sites, that calculates burn rates, that can be trained on easily, that can add surge staffing. So if you find stuff that does that, these are kind of like the bullet points, the core principles that folks mention that they need in a system that's unique to us. So if we can be of use in any way, please reach out. If we can be a help, an advisor, if you have questions about Logista and what that may look like for your team, we can talk about it. We can talk first. If you want to get your team in together for a demo, we can do, a customized demo for that too. But that is all. James, I can send you one. Good to see you, James. And I thank you all for everything you do, from pharmacy to the EMA to the public health, to public works. It's quite the challenge we have in front of us. And I hope we can all support you in your one small part of all your journey, and super grateful you got to spend some time with us. So thank you. And again, email me if I can share that tabletop with you and it's useful.